You guys hear me okay? This is an attempt to keep me sitting, okay? Because I will otherwise wander around and pace this stage, all right? I'm not innately very patient or innately very calm, and so we're going to try this as an experiment to see if I'll just stay put and sit in one place and not wear you all out walking back and forth. I don't like talking about myself, but I'll talk about myself a little bit tonight. I've lived in Roswell 30 years. I moved here in the mid-1980s when RJR Nabisco, a big food and beverage company, moved here. I was working for them out in San Francisco, but my wife's family was all in Georgia, and she said, we've been here a while, we're going to move back, go take a job. It doesn't matter to me what it is, we're moving. So one of the secrets to my 37-year marriage, 37-year marriage, is I know when to say yes, dear, so we moved back here. I worked for RJR for a few years in their corporate headquarters here until they went through a leveraged buyout and a private equity firm came in and bought them. And I just didn't really like the team that did that, so I sent blind resumes out and I took a job at Equifax, the credit bureau here, at about half the salary I was making at RJR Nabisco because I had 3 kids under 5 and I needed a job. That was really the principal thing they were worried about in hiring me, was would I be motivated? You know, that I was getting paid less than I was getting paid before. And I told them I was presently making 0, so, you know, everything I got was a big increase. And that sealed the deal. So I worked for them for a number of years, and ultimately I spun off what was their insurance services division in 1997 after working for 4 or 5 years with a business partner to get that business turned around. Initially it was losing $1.5 million a month, and by the time we took it public it was making about $50 million a year. We took it public in 97 for about $450 million. We sold it 11 years later for $4.5 billion, and I found myself at 55 years old sitting in my house going, now what do I do, right? We'll talk about that a little bit too, and you know, how you learn a lot about how you make choices when you actually get to make choices, you know, as opposed to kind of following your feet. But it was back when that company was headquartered up in Alpharetta on Wynwood Parkway. We had about 30 acres up there. At our peak, we probably had 15,000 employees, but we had about 2,000 up in Alpharetta, and that was where I spent most of my time. And there, initially as chief financial officer, but eventually as COO and president, I'd get mail every month from Jackie that was just cottage school mail. And my secretary, being the ultimate curator of what made it to my desk and what didn't make it to my desk, somehow always managed to get the cottage school paperwork in my mail folder for me to read. And you know, my ADD got the best of me at some point, and I said, all right, fine, call these people up, let me go figure out why they keep sending me stuff, probably something like that, I said. And I came over here and got a tour of the place, and you know, we chatted for a little while, and I remember thinking 2 things as I left that meeting. One was this school has a lot in common with my workforce. And my workforce was principally, you know, 20-something and 30-something high technology people, coupled with 50s, 40-something and 50-something, you know, sort of services, older skills people. All of them had trouble managing their own behavior and getting along well with others. And it was some of the techniques that were being deployed here were exactly the same techniques we were essentially trying to deploy, you know, at a multi-billion-dollar multinational high technology company to get our people to sort of work together better and function more effectively. The second thing I left with was really something that resonated with my own kids. I have 3 children, they're all grown now. My entire family is as scrambled as I am from an attention span, hyperactivity, whatever standpoint. And I remember watching my kids struggle to feel successful. I didn't really care how they did in school. I mean, I cared, but not that much. Don't tell my wife I said it that way. But, you know, what I really cared was that they, like, did the work and felt successful. And at times, some of them, and most times one of them, just didn't feel very successful. And it's pretty soul-crushing when you just don't have anything that you feel great about yourself about. And so it's something that we work in corporate world, we call that culture, right? But in the evolutionary sort of educational world, you know, we call that trying something different to teach that kid, you know, how to think a little bit different. And I remember thinking, and I think, you know, I don't know if you recall it or not, Jackie, but I vividly recall talking about the importance of success, right, and feeling successful. And so for me, the cottage school is a place that works really hard in a lot of different ways to make kids feel successful, and that resonates with me. So I reluctantly agreed to join a board. I'm on a lot of boards, but I reluctantly agreed to do most everything. And I've been here for a long time. I tried to figure out how many years I've been here, and I actually don't know, but 9.5, so I've been here a while. So the Cottage School has been a great place for me to spend some of my time and energy, and it reminds me of a lot of things about, myself growing up and also my own children, as we were trying to get, them educated and, sort of on a good track for an adult. We're going to talk tonight mostly about, how you create an environment where people can do better, and how you create an environment where any individual can feel better about themselves. Some of that will be me talking about my own, behavior problems, but some of that will be talking about what I learned running big companies and trying to get people to, do what they needed to do to perform as well as they can. As I said, most of my life has been in big corporations, and most of it's been in operations. There's a lot of different skill sets that corporations have, strategy, marketing, sales, whatever. Mine was really in operations. Most people, when they think about operations, they think it's, they're the people that keep the trains running on time. But that's really not what the job is at all, particularly when you make it to, the head of operations. It's really about eliminating dysfunction so that the trains can run on time by themselves. And that's a big difference because, if you're trying to do something task, you focus a lot on trying to become better at that one task. If instead you're just trying to focus on taking noise and friction out of the system, you really become a generalist, and your specialty is really looking for abnormalities and trying to find a way to minimize the impact of those. I don't have the skills to make much go away, but I have a lot of skills to either reposition the problem to make people think about it differently, or to help them find some other way to look at their progress and feel like they too are making progress, even though maybe not against the traditional scorecard that most people think about that. And so, because of my background in operations and because of all the work that I've done on eliminating dysfunction, truthfully, what it takes to be, the one thing it takes to try and optimize your chance for success is to simply do stuff you suck at less. I want you to stop for a minute and think about that, because we're going to talk about that for quite a while. But, all of us are brilliant at certain things. I now spend a lot of time on construction sites. I have a lot of real estate development projects here in town. But before that, I spent a lot of time in corporate organizations, and I'm still on about 8 or 10 boards, 2 big public companies. And every single person I deal with is both brilliant and an idiot. Every single person I both deal with is highly functional and almost dysfunctional, right? And so we talk about, things in absolutes, like they're highly functional or they're dysfunctional, but we're really mostly just sub-functional about different things, right? I'm a different person in the morning than I am in the afternoon. I'm a different person when I'm talking to my wife than when I'm talking to my granddaughter. Everybody wants to be my granddaughter or my dog now because they think they get the best treatment, right? But I mean, it's true. And so one of the things we have to realize is you can either create an environment where everybody can figure out how they're going to decode everybody else's behavior, or we can all find a way to mask our behaviors or change our own behaviors so we fit in and perform a little better. And that's what I've always focused on. And the simple language I use for it all the time is just try and suck less, right? It's not unique to me. All kinds of people use that phrase. Baseball coach Joe Madden at Chicago Cubs uses it, right? It's been used by a lot of businesses. But I mean, trying to eliminate the dysfunction that we bring to the table so that we have a better chance to perform more highly. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I've got about a dozen points I'm going to make. Literally half of them come from things I learned in school. So coincidentally, we're in a school here, but we'll talk about that a little bit too. I grew up in Northern Virginia, in a suburb that was, probably what would be called lower middle class. Everybody was just like me. Everybody did the same things I did. We all sort of went to school. We didn't have a whole lot of goals other than, go to school, come home, do your homework. It was okay to fail. Everybody failed at different things. And being in grades was sort of fluid. I had buddies my age that were a grade below me. They were in a grade above me. I had twins across the street that were in different grades, even though they were the same age. I mean, this grade thing didn't mean what it means now. you were really supposed to learn certain basic tasks, and when you managed to get those behind you, you got to move forward and work on other stuff. That was what grades meant. They also meant you had a nice or a bad teacher, but they really didn't mean much about your buddies. You still hung out with the same people, you still did the same stuff, and there really wasn't a lot of focus on grades. We learned a lot about just surviving and getting through the day. You know, nowadays you guys don't have the trouble of being bored. Most of you youngsters, it's hard. There's an unlimited possibility of everything to go do. We learned how to be bored pretty well. And you know, your parents were perfectly fine with you being bored. You could do nothing and that was okay. You could go invent something to do and that was okay. It was nobody's job to entertain you and nobody's job to try and find something to fulfill your mind. Well, if you're like me and you're sort of generally bouncing off the rails anyway, and everybody else in the neighborhood is basically like me, and we're all sort of bouncing off the rails all day long, we literally would dutifully line up and go to school, and then we would come back and we would run wild in the neighborhood until we got called in for dinner. And that was it. That was what you did every day. So it's not that we were feral, but we were not anywhere near as closely supervised as kids are today. And there was not anywhere near the amount of, you know, time blocking and task assignment that we had growing up. When I look back at not only how I helped form the company, that there's some people here that helped me do it, but also sort of how I managed to survive my own way through elementary school, there are about a half a dozen things that I think were really seminal to, you know, my success. One was the rules were simple. You know, I get bored quick, I can't pay attention very long, and so when you give me a little long list of rules, at some point I'm gone, right? When I was growing up, you had maybe 10 rules, right? You know, be respectful, behave, you know, try your best, you know, go to school, do your chores, you know, whatever. They were not complicated things. And even though some of those broke down into something that I would obviously learn was more complicated, like behave is a tricky one. Because you can think you're behaving, but you're not really behaving. But we really didn't have a lot of rules. And I've learned that in both managing myself and managing people that are like me in high-performance organizations, you need to try and give them fewer rules. Tell them how you want them to do things. Don't tell them exactly what you want them to do. And back then we had very few rules. I don't know how many of you folks grew up in a house where there were rules posted on a wall, but I did, right? We had rules posted on the refrigerator that said, here are the house rules, do these things. When I went to a classroom, you had these rules, here are the things. As long as you did those rules, you could succeed. I think that matters a lot, and I think simple rules matter to people like me that just can't pay attention very long or very well. The second thing I think that helped me a lot was that I didn't spend any time agonizing about whether I fit in. Everybody fit in. We were all equally screwed up, right? We were all, and I mean, I don't mean that we were the same, because we weren't the same. People's parents had different jobs, and you know, people's families had different houses and cars. But I mean that we didn't have any of the social fit angst that people have today now. Some of that's the media, right? Some of both the electronic media as well as the social media. But you know, my worldview was these people, right? They had all the same stuff I had, so I didn't have to worry about anything in my head that might get me feeling like I wasn't a high performer. That's really hard now, but I think that really matters. So one of the things we worked hard for in the corporate culture, and I worked hard for myself, is I don't worry about in any environment whether I fit or belong there. I just go try and do the best that I can to fit in and feel at home. But that's a gift. Not everybody has that gift. I have kids that don't have that gift. You know, I have kids that go in situations that have a tough time trying to feel like they're, you know, they can be comfortable and let them express themselves openly. You guys probably at the school, you know, do have a lot of that as well, right? But it exists in the business world too. And if people don't feel like they fit, all kinds of erratic behavior happens. We already have all that erratic behavior in us. It's just manifesting itself because we've got this extra anxiety about whether we fit. We all need to work on that some. You know, I mean, I think we spend so much time as a society talking about where we differ, but we mostly don't differ that much. I mean, like I said, I've been married 37 years. I disagree with my wife about 49.5% of the time. You know, we get along just fine. So, but I think making people feel like they fit is a big deal. And I learned that in grade school. I mean, we fit, right? So that culture mattered to me. The third thing I think that mattered a lot to me, you know, to help me be successful was failure was just a thing, right? I mean, failure really didn't matter. You would screw something up and you'd go home and, you know, the first thing they'd ask you is how you did. You'd say, I didn't do very well. And they'd go, well, how'd Billy do? Or how'd your brother do? And they go, I don't know, I don't think they did very well either. And they go, okay, try harder. Click. Literally, that was it. There wasn't any performance anxiety about, you know, how come you didn't do your best and how come you didn't get 100 and how come you couldn't do X. It was really just, you know, I need you, you know, if you want to do better, you're going to have to learn how to try harder, right? Part of that is you're young and there's so much you don't know that give the kid room, maybe they'll turn into something, right? But part of it's also failure was just part of learning how to win, right? I watched this morning Scott Hamilton talk while I had the Olympics on. Which is a whole other story in my office because we've changed cable and so now I can't get any TV to change channels anywhere. And it seems very Simpson-like that I ought to be able to fix that with all the tech people I have running around me, but I can't get it to work. But anyway, they got the Olympics on. So Scott Hamilton talked, and he said he fell 41,000 times. Think about that. And then I watched them interview one of the skiers, McKella, I think. She got a silver. Do you feel like a loser if you get a silver in the Olympics? I mean, think about that for a second, really. I mean, if you spent your whole life trying to compete for something and you come in second, or you come in third, or you don't get a medal at all, do you feel like a loser because of that? We didn't feel like a loser like that because the kids, otherwise we would never have anybody to play any games with, right? Somebody had to lose, it's just how it is. You lost, move on, no big deal, shake it off, right? Failure doesn't feel like that today. Failure feels a lot harsher like that now. And in corporations, I certainly know, I work with corporations on the consulting side, where there's a low tolerance for failure. I have a pretty high tolerance for failure, right? Because I don't think you learn much if you win. I think people coast when they win. I think you learn when you lose. That's my dad would say, rest his soul, you know, that's a hard way to learn everything, son. But, you know, you learn a lot losing. And I think failure, you know, I think we need to learn how to deal with failure a little bit. But I think letting me by with failure helped me a lot, right? I had permission to fail. And I think for a kid like me, and I had plenty of opportunities to fail, certainly, you know, that mattered. Fourth, I think that even though I think they were trying to use the carrot and stick to motivate us, every single thing we ever heard was a carrot and stick sort of assignment. Get your homework done and then you can go out and play. Go get your chores done before you go do X, right? You know, finish your dinner and you can have this. I mean, the entire world was set up around carrot and stick. But what it really does teach you, along with these other 3 or 4 thoughts, is that, you know, you have a mission mindset. I just need to go get this done. And it isn't that you like the work, or it isn't that you want to work harder than anybody else, or you care about that topic any more than anybody else. It's just you were brought up to just go get the work done. And, you know, at the end of getting the work done, you could reset and kind of do what you want to go do. And for me, that was liberty. That was permission to just blow through some stuff that I didn't absolutely care about at all, not necessarily doing my greatest work, but I could get that work done and then go do something else. And I think that mission mindset now is one of the cadence things that makes a person like me successful. I have a lot of things going on in my head, and I keep a lot of lists of everything going on around, but I think that, you know, my desire to get things done partially feeds a little bit of OCD in me, that I want to make a list and check things off, which is a bit of a destructive behavior because you can make a lot of lists of stuff and get absolutely nothing done. But I also think it just shows me to break things down into smaller tasks, and I'm just going to tick that off the list. And I learned that from this carrot and stick. That's really where I learned the kind of mission mindset, right? Don't think about the big picture, just get the work done. The last thing I learned, and I learned this in grade school, and the way my parents brought me up, was it was okay not to like stuff. And it goes back to a little bit to my being bored comment, but, people are concerned now when you don't like things. Why are you not feeling well? Why are you upset about that? Why does that, do you not agree with what that person said? It was okay not to like stuff, right? It was part of how you curated who you were, but it's also something that really helped me learn that it was okay to say no to things. That, that I didn't, for a long time as a child, I felt like, because I was only semi-functional, and we'll talk a minute about some of my manifestations of that, but for a long time as a child, I felt like if people told me to do something, I was expected to go do it, and I needed to try and find a way to get that done. Or I had to go like something, right? I want you to go try X, and I want you to, and truthfully, I just didn't like a lot of stuff. And my parents gave me permission to not like a lot of stuff, which as I grew up, I turned into one of the most powerful weapons I have as a human, my ability to say no to things. Because when your brain is like my brain, and like a lot of people's brains, all of us at times, right? Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 cups of coffee to get us in that state, but we end up in that state. When you've just got a lot of stuff going on and there's too many things coming at you, it's easy to just give yourself permission to just say no to a bunch of those. And one of the things that, if you learn how to do it right, you'll say no to the things you're not very good at or that you don't like very much. And that will allow more yeses to come in that you really do care about. And I learned that very early, that saying no to things was freeing me to say yes to things that I cared about more. Anyway, I learned those 5 things in grade school. Those 5 things followed me through most of my, corporate life, and I still use them today in my board and my consulting gigs. But back to Doug. Doug's in elementary school. Doug's not doing so swift. I never got held back a grade. I certainly never got advanced a grade. But I spent a lot of time with the first graders, even when I wasn't in first grade. That was one of the ways they would try and get your attention back when I was growing up, is they would just send you down to the first graders because you were misbehaving like a first grader. I didn't care. They kind of liked having me, and it was better than doing what I was doing. And the truth is that, I don't know if this is true for anybody, I am not the worst, psychologist ever, but part of my hyperactivity and my, festering about, things that I want to get done is comforting. It's a little like a self-soothing thing. Like, if I'm feeling, overwhelmed about things, I can, feed my OCD by making lists and kind of taking things off. If I feel like there's too many things coming at me, I can just stop paying attention to those things and compartmentalize and make them go away. I think to some extent in elementary school, getting sent up to first grade was like that to me. I'm doing a hard reset. Adios, I'm going down to first grade. I'm going to hang out here a while. It happened a bunch. Mostly because of my, failure to exercise self-control, which was a feature of my report cards. Actually, it's been my feature of my report cards all the way through my life. I even had an executive, not that terribly many years ago, write down in a performance review for me that I could usually demonstrate patience when the situation demands it. Which I thought was a well-turned phrase and pretty reflective of sort of the way I actually behaved. But so I got sent down a lot to first grade for that. On the other side of it, I spent a lot of time not acting up, but sitting in classrooms staring into space. I was just a spacey kid. I'm not sure whether it went to blank spots. It's been a long time, right? I don't know whether it went to blank spots or my thoughts drifted to other things, but I was pretty spaced out as a kid. So much so that I remember vividly my 5th grade math teacher, whose name I don't recall, but I wish I knew it, would literally bellow like a foghorn, curling fog bank, to snap me out of it, in the middle of class. And that didn't really bother me either. I mean, my mom actually at one point made a stocking cap that looked like a fog thing, and I actually wore it to class one day to try and get his ire, and it earned me, a trip to the corner, which I spent a fair amount of time in 5th grade there. But between me having ants in my pants and not really wanting to do the work and really caring about the work, and me, spacing out and whatever, somehow the system managed to keep me between the guardrails. I can't claim a lot of credit for my progress, up through elementary and middle school, and frankly, even high school. I mean, I did a lot of things. I always worked. I always had a lot of jobs, but my interest in being a student wasn't great. But somehow the system to that point helped me. And so those 5 simple things that we talked about really matter a lot, and I rely on them a lot today, even as a man decades older than that. So I somehow managed to graduate high school. I was a exceptional BC student. And it was, generally agreed in my household that I would go away to college somewhere not close. That meant definitely you weren't coming home for dinner anywhere. So I packed off to Virginia Tech, which I didn't want to go to, but it was the family school, and I ended up liking it. And I began my freshman year as a business major. You had to pick some school to go to. Business seemed as good as anything, so I picked business. And I was doing swimmingly. I mean, I was having a great time. Things were wonderful. I was taking all kinds of interesting classes. I didn't have to do anything anybody didn't want me to do, including things I myself, didn't really want to go do. I just said I'm not going to do that either. And I was completely self-scheduling, and it was just a fantastic time. The measurements the rest of the world used didn't agree with my assessment. And as I completed my freshman year, my cumulative 3.4, which was a 1.6 followed by a 1.8, had me on probation. And so now, a meaningful goal became get invited to go back to school, which heretofore wasn't really an issue growing up, right? You could go to school, it wasn't a problem. But in college, you had to actually be invited back, and it turned out I had to have a better GPA than I had to be invited back. That also motivated my dad to restructure our financial bargain, which was perfectly fair. And now I had a little less time to screw around, I had a little more time, to work. But I did, start to learn some things about myself while I was in college. So in addition to these basic things like, Doug, keep the rules simple, and it's okay to fail and whatever. I mean, I learned about a couple things about myself. One was that I have a very definitive clock, and I think most of us do. But we try to ignore what it really is. And when you go to college, many of you probably have, but some of you may not have. It's the only time you get, maybe when you go on a really long vacation, although I don't have the attention span to go on really long vacations, but you don't really get to go reset. And when you reset, your clock matters a lot. And so one of the things that I allowed for myself as a compensation tool, and I also allowed, later at ChoicePoint as a tool for the employees, is, I scheduled things when I was most effective. So, I had my meetings early in the morning, and I didn't really have very many meetings in the afternoon because my attention span in the afternoon is not great. You're taking a risk here, it's 6-something at night, so I can be all over the place now. I also let employees to some extent come and go as they please. We had hours and you had schedules and, there were things that had to be done, but, we really didn't, we hired adults, we treated them like adults, expected them to behave like adults, and, you have to learn how to self-schedule. We allowed people to do that to a point, right? We're still a community, so stuff has to happen, meetings have to happen, but I have a definitive clock, and I learned in college that clock matters to me. So it doesn't matter whether I follow my other principles or not. I have to respect my biological clock. In my case, I also learned that I learn things best when partially distracted. Let's hold that thought for a second. I learn things best when partially distracted. It took me a long time to figure that out. I mean, it makes sense if you look back. Because when I was a young kid, I'd have the baseball game, on my transistor radio while I was doing my homework. And when I was a high schooler, I would have music on, while I was doing my homework. And, when I went to college and I had a lot of time, to be out, right? You're in a class now, you're sitting in the courtyard killing an hour. You're working, you've got 2 hours between your job or whatever. I really struggled to try to, learn anything. And I'm a good reader. But I just wasn't learning much. And it was brute force learning, and I resent brute force anything, okay? So, but I learned that if I were trying to, if I was learning something immediately useful, that I could focus on it in silence and actually learn that. But if I was learning something that was sort of background or not immediately useful, then I really had to have something else going on. Well, fast forward now, it's almost impossible not to do anything without something else happening in your face, right? I mean, you know, there's the radio playing, there's TV's on, the kids are looking at their, I mean, I go to dinner and it's like I just want to collect all the phones. You know, I just literally want to go, everybody get their phone. We're not going to look at our phones while we're at dinner, but I think we've fed that as well. I think a lot of people suffer from that. I think a lot of us have more than one motor running at one time, and we've got to figure out how to get those things tuned to the right channel or get them organized in a way that I can maximize my learning. But I was able, I ultimately, you know, we'll talk about my Virginia Tech career in a minute, but I was ultimately able to learn that, you know, when I needed to learn something right now for short-term memory, I could sit down and memorize it in quiet. But if I had to learn like the history of the universe or something that wasn't particularly useful to me right at the moment, I had to be partially distracted for that to actually sink in. I don't know what that's called. Somebody could tell me what that's called. But you know, for me, it was a big part of my. It was one of the big accelerants to my ability to ingest data, which is now a real strength. I can actually suck down a lot of data at one time while reading. But that was a thing. The third thing I think I learned, you know, while I was at college was that, you know, it was okay to only do okay at stuff. You know, when you're in college, there's a lot of stuff you have to do that, you know, matters, but not that much. And I learned that I could ration my energy and spend very high quality energy on the things that mattered the most to me. And I could still complete, but not anywhere near as carefully, low quality things that didn't matter as much to me. And that was meaningful to a kid like me, because I can't look at everything equally. Some things I care about, some things I don't. Some things I understand a lot, some things I don't. And I learned that from, again, my grade school rules, just do the work that you're assigned, right? The notion of, you know, trying to get something accomplished. I learned that I could get that done, but I could not give it my best cycles. I could not give it my best effort. And I could save my best cycles and my best effort for something that I really cared about. So I managed to get through undergrad and grad school in better shape than I got through elementary and high school. And my grade point average, you know, ultimately rose up, and I graduated with an undergraduate degree in accounting finance and a master's degree in accounting. I picked accounting because after you went to business school, who knew you had to pick a major? I thought you just picked a school and you were done, but you had to pick a major, and accounting was the first major alphabetically listed in the book. And so, using the decision logic that, you know, God gave me, right? If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, then, you know, I picked accounting. But it somehow stuck with me. And if you think about the things I've talked about so far, there was an orderliness to it that I found comforting. It had simple rules. It's not really very complicated. And I could do it really quickly, which, you know, I don't like doing much, and I'm lazy, and so I was able to do it really quickly. But I had a lot of the same manifestations I had in elementary and high school and college. I was really, really stubborn, and mostly with myself. And so I remember taking a class. I was an accounting major, but you could take classes that, you know, were above the level you were at that you weren't required to take to graduate. And I took an income tax class, really only to prove the point that I could pass this without ever memorizing anything. You know, there was a big giant book of rules, and I was determined not to memorize stuff you could look up. And I said, surely there's got to be a way to pass this class without looking this stuff up. And I took the class, sat in my usual back row seat, and by this time, you know, I was a senior-ish, so people knew me, you know, there. It wasn't like, who's that guy? It was Doug. No, and I promptly failed the class. But I knew my theory was correct, so I took it again, right? I knew that, you know, I could still, that I would be capable of passing this class without actually doing any reading, of actually memorizing anything out of the book, and I ultimately got a C or D in that class. And I didn't need it to graduate, but my stubbornness taught me that I was going to prove a point to myself. Don't prove points to yourself that don't matter, right? This didn't matter. Funny side story, you know, the young professor that flunked me was a guy named Gene Seago, who is coincidentally, but at the time I didn't know, a distant relative of mine. And he is now the Curling Professor of Accounting at Virginia Tech. I didn't pick him, but you know, I have a number of scholarships and professorships at the university now that did in my name of my dad and my brother and my uncle, and this guy happens to get in that. So when I see him, we laugh about that, you know, look, I flunked your class almost twice. Once for sure, right? But almost twice. And it had absolutely no effect on my success at all. But the only reason I tell that story isn't because I flunked it, or because it didn't matter, or because at the end of the day, you know, I was able to do something back at the university. Because that was like a moment where I learned, be careful what you aim for. Because sometimes you get things in your head that you think you want, and they really don't matter, and you sacrifice a lot trying to get those things. And that, to me, that was my big aha. I learned not to do that. Fast forward a number of decades, I'm running a big company up here in Alpharetta. I've got, probably at the time we moved here, Moses, 5,000 employees, 6,000 employees around the country. You know, during the time we were public, we bought 64 companies. You know, we had employees all over the place. I knew many of them by name. I interviewed every manager we hired nationwide. I mean, I had a full-blown, high-tech, fast-moving company. 4 times Georgia Company of the Year while we were public. And I had so many dysfunctional people working for me, it was just unbelievable. I mean, I had lawyers that wanted to buy school buses and sleep in the parking lot. I had senior executives that were never around for 2 o'clock meetings because they went across the street and slept in their car for an hour and took a nap. I had, you know, technology people that wanted to bring their parents to work. I had, you know, you name it, we had it. And it was really, you know, a giant exercise in how, you know, I know what I like and I know the environment that I like to work in. But I have all of these highly spirited people, all highly intelligent. Again, most people are highly intelligent, just about different things, right? But I mean, all manner of just nonsense that's going on. I mean, it's just complete chaos there. And so I'm trying to figure out how to bring organization to this. And I've inherited it, and I'm not inherently an organized guy. You know, I'm messy, right? I've got to find a way to try and change my behavior to fit them, because they're not going to hand me 5,000 decoder rings that let me figure out how to get all these people to do what I need them to do to work together. So I learned 5 or 6 techniques there that really helped me, and I think we can talk later in the Q&A whether I think that matters to you know, in my personal life as much as not. But you know, I became a list tape maker. First and foremost, I make lists. I get stuff out of my head and onto paper. I sleep like a baby at night. My wife is extraordinarily jealous of that. She goes, don't things keep you up? Nope. You know, don't you go to bed worrying about stuff? Nope. You know, it's right there on a piece of paper. It's going to be waiting for me when I come back. I don't have to worry about it all. And I mean, you have to learn this. You have to teach yourself this, but it's like a little box you put your stuff in and you just go, I'm done with that now. That really helped me a lot, and it became a bit of a joke around the place that, you know, I had these cards all the time. I wanted everybody to know the financials of the company better because we were still trying to get great. So I had a bunch of financials printed up on cards, and I made all the executives carry them around everywhere. And, you know, when we talked about them, I would go, do you have your cards? I want you to know the numbers. You know, we had, at one point, 256 offices around the country with all kinds of people in those offices. We had managers we needed to know. We had problem employees we needed to know. We had high potential people we had to need to know. How are you going to keep up with these people? We're going to make cards. And so every time you go out of town, you're going to carry a card with you, and it says, these are all the people you need to meet. This is exactly who they are. This is exactly what they do, you know? And so I would carry those cards around. And I didn't pay attention to people so much as I paid attention to problems or projects. And so I made cards about problems. I didn't make cards about Joe or Jackie or Michael or anybody else. I went, here's a problem. Let's talk about this problem until it's gone. And so people would actually come meet with me and go, you know, do I have a card yet, right? Has this problem merited a card, right? But list making really helped me. And I still today, I used to carry around cards all the time. Now I carry around a book because I don't have quite as many cards to carry. But some of the companies I work with do this. as a technique to try and help people focus more on problem solving and trying to keep stuff straight and to keep track of sort of what matters and what doesn't. The second thing I did is I reprioritize everything pretty much every week or 10 days. I start over completely. You'd be surprised how many things don't matter a week later. I mean, it's unbelievable how many things don't matter a week later. And so I would get all worked up about stuff, and everybody would be all worked up about stuff. And, you know, I was trying to figure out, I was working myself into a frenzy, trying to figure out how to deal with it. And, you know, if it sits for 7 or 10 days and it didn't blow up, maybe I can get rid of it. Just maybe it'll take care of itself, right? And so the truth is a lot of problems do solve themselves if you leave them alone. But what you really have to do is learn how to curate a problem. And so to learn how to curate a problem, you have to learn how to curate in your head what you care about and what you don't. In my case, I cared about people, things, and I cared about, you know, the size of the hole that got created if a problem blew up. I didn't really care about a problem. I just cared about if it could turn into a really giant hole, then I would pay attention to it. But I have a high tolerance for noise, and a lot of stuff I would just let go. And the constant reprioritization also cleanses and feeds the OCD a little bit because you're taking stuff off the list, right? I had 20 things I had to go do. Now I only have 10. I only did 2 of them. I dumped 8 of them, but still, I only have 10. You know, that's more better, right? So, you know, I'm better off there. The third thing is I learned, I'm pretty binary about my attention span. I either care about something or I don't. And so you learn to be a little sharper edged about that. You know, a lot of people, I used to a lot too, I'd live in a land of I care but not that much, right? I had 5,000 things I cared about, but none of them all that much. And that's draining. You know, I talked to one of my kids today, been invited to go do something, hopefully not by anybody in this room, but he'd been invited to go do something and he came to see me and, you know, it was a community thing and he didn't really want to do it and he explained why he really didn't want to do it and I just said, well then politely tell them no. And he was sort of stunned as, well, can you really, but is that the right thing to do? Michael, it's okay as a human to say no to things. It's okay to go, I don't care about that, right? I just don't care about that, right? I don't watch the nightly news. I just don't care about it, right? I read a bunch of newspapers every day, but I mean, I don't care what those people have to say to me. And it doesn't matter that it's going on. I'm able to perfectly ignore it. I think that, you know, for me, learning to be very sharp-edged about what I cared about and what I didn't allowed me a lot of time to dive into things. Cottage school's an example, right, where I could have gone, I don't really want to deal with the cottage school, right, but things about the cottage school resonate with me, and I freed up bandwidth to go do that, but I also don't have any regrets about the stuff I say no to. I say no to a lot of stuff. I don't do weddings. I do funerals, but I don't do weddings. I don't like weddings. I don't even really like my own kids' weddings. I hate couple showers, right? That was the stupidest idea ever. I don't even know where that thing came from, right? I refuse. I just hate that. I don't like that, right? So I mean, I think that, you know, I don't know whether it's something we learn as we're trying to figure out how to get along with people, or we learn because we're human and we're all sort of distractible anyway, and we've got a lot of things that momentarily pull on us. But, you know, I'm not one to go see something and then go, oh, that's my new cause, I've got to go get it. I can go, nope, I don't really care about all that, right? I'm glad you care about it. My wife is a complete political revolutionary. Complete. Absolutely. I'm bad. She's terrible. Viva la revolution. Don't drag me in it, right? How many people struggle at times paying attention to things? Everyone, right? Everyone, right? How many people struggle at times doing work that needs to be done, but work that you don't care about? Right? This is life, folks. I mean, this is a cross-section of America right here, right? You go, I can't get it done. Nobody gets it done. I mean, we're all terrible. You know, we just do the best we can, right? Yes.
So you made a point about choosing to put your energy into things that you love or that are important to you. And I think just for a lot of decisions we make, we think, well, what is going to be where I need to put my energy? Maybe not where I would love to put my energy. Is there a difference there for you?
Yeah, I need to put my energy in things that can get me in big trouble, but otherwise, I don't worry about where I need to put my energy. I mean, yes, once a month I have to put some energy into paying bills if I can't get Michael to pay them, but I mean, basically, you get to decide everything you do. You know, we don't necessarily flex it. I'm a big schedule flexer, right? Like I shove stuff that I hate to do, like on certain days. Or if I have a lot of random meetings with people I don't know, which happens, I stack them all together, right? Because I don't like changing channels a whole lot. That's, I think, one of my big weaknesses is, although my head changes channels 5,000 times a second, I don't want you to change channel on me when you're talking to me, right? I want to finish this. I'm a single thread at a time kind of, you know, manager. But I think you pretty much get to decide, you know, what you want to work on and what you don't. I mean, everybody's different. I don't want to make it sound like you can not care and be okay, because you have to care about things. But I also think that, you know, most of the big decisions in my life, right, I'm going to move to I'm going to take up from Charlotte, North Carolina, and move to San Francisco. That was random, right? I, you know, ended up doing work for somebody at, you know, Del Monte Foods that, you know, had a problem that, you know, he thought I could help fix, and it set me off to go do a bunch of other stuff. That was random, right? You know, Nabisco Brands and RJR merge, and they need me to do the accounting integration of those two companies. I'm out in San Francisco. That was random. I can't make a merger happen, right? They decide to move to Atlanta, where my wife's family is. That was random, right? The company
It worked out.
got bought. That was random, right? I went to work for Equifax. Okay, I'm hanging around doing a pretty good job at Equifax. I feel okay. The CFO of Equifax comes to see me, guy my age, goes, hey, we get this really screwed up division. It's terrible. They're thinking about shutting it down. It's going to cost $50 million. 15,000 people are going to lose their jobs. They want me to go run it. Do you think I should go run it? Heck yeah, go run it. I'm going to take your tushy CFO job. No, he goes, no, you're coming with me, right? Totally random. Right? I mean, so much of what happens to us, you can say it's random, or you can, you know, and I believe it's serendipity. That's kind of a crystal-like thing, but I actually believe that you can, like, manage random a little bit by making opportunities more prevalent. You know, it's like networking when you're trying to find a job, right? You're more likely to find a job if you actually get out and go do things, right? If you're bored and you're looking for something to do, you're liable to find more interesting things to go do if you go out and, you know, spend time in the community, right? If I'm struggling with whether I believe X or Y, if I go talk to other people about it, I get additional perspective on helps me curate that. Almost all that's really, you know,
right.
When you look back at it, it's random. Now, I'm sure there's some things that aren't random, right? Like, you know, the fact that Scott Hamilton stopped falling and ultimately got, you know, gold medals isn't random. It's called hard work, right? But I do think that a lot of what happens is more random than we think. And I actually think the better opportunities are floating around if you lift your head up, not if you keep your head down. And I think a lot of things that if you just keep your head down and you plow forward, you miss a lot of things that you might have found enjoyable or that might have ultimately been more rewarding. Certainly in my case, that's the case. I'm a big believer in surfing the waves you get, not trying to make the weather.
So Doug, you hit a home run for me, because I think there's a lot in common, but I think you're a humble man in that what you just said wraps a lot of what you gave us in the speech, in that you don't actually, I think, relish sitting around just doing nothing. You get bored and you do stuff. And similarly, I was a B student. God gave me enough, you know, brains to get a B on the bus, studying on the way into high school. But I did a paper route before that because I love the money that you could spend afterwards and that sort of thing. But when it comes down to doing, you know, having the politically incorrect capability to tell people no, or I'm just not interested, and sometimes it's things that you should care about that. Why don't you care? You know, but you do get more done, you get more focused until you get home and you realize I'm right about that little fight I had with my wife last week, and I'm still right about it, but I love you too much to win that war. And that's maybe a maturity thing, but it's hard to get there sometimes when all day long you spend your life fixing things. People come in your office, I'm a fixer, I can do fixer. but learning how to decide when that battle's going to win.
Yeah, I'm never right with my wife. Let's just put that on record. Right? Never right. See, last night I was wrong about something that I'm absolutely sure I was right about, but it doesn't really matter, right? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have definitely comfortable in my own skin, but I also think that, you know, I have been in a position to see a lot of different people in a lot of different situations, and I see that stress is the number one thing. I know in my own case, right? I lost 65 pounds when I retired. Why? The absence of stress, right? Stress is a killer. We manufacture our own stress. If I try to say I want to learn how to, you know, walk a mile in 6 minutes, I mean, I better start with walking a mile in 10 minutes and then working my way down to something else, right? Because if 6 minutes is my goal, I'm going to fail. You see people all the time setting up things in their head that matter to them that just create stress if they don't achieve them. When instead you could go, I'd like to be, I really like fly fishing, folks. I really like it. I'm truly awful at it. I'm terrible at it, but I like it. I don't know whether it's standing out in the middle of nowhere and doing nothing is reasonably successful. I'm really not sure. It's always pretty. Trout are never really where it's dumb, where it's beautiful, where it's not beautiful. But I mean, I'm terrible, but I still go do it, right? I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, I appreciate your compliment, but I think a lot of it is, you know, I got one time around the planet here, you know, and I can't spend a lot of time worrying about what people think. I need to be, I try to be polite about it. I'm not always, I'm pretty blunt, but I do think you got it, you know, I have to maximize myself. And if I don't maximize myself, I'm not going to maximize my interaction with anybody else. Yes.
I wonder if you might have a story about somebody you worked with who was very talented, but also difficult, and how you made that, you know.
A million of them. A million of them. You know, today I'm on a job site, you know, and I got a supervisor. I'm trying to build a house, and I'm obviously not very good at it because I can't get the thing done. But I have a supervisor today. I brought somebody over there that's a pretty good plumber, electrician, kind of general contractor guy. We're trying to get some punch stuff done. And, you know, to get a guy that wired the whole house to come back to fix a couple things is hard. So I brought this guy in. This guy's extraordinarily talented. He's a complete pain in the ass. Talks nonstop all day long. Everybody that worked before him was a hack, right? Couldn't do the job right. And he always has a better part that he could get instead of the part that you have for him to go do it. And so my supervisor sent me a note. Literally, it's on my phone. Let me see if I can read to you. Let's see if I can read to you right now. Let's see what it says. This was today, just coincidentally that you asked me. So-and-so is definitely good to have around, but he is a handful. I meant that as a compliment. I am glad to have him, but he does require maintenance and my patience. Today, right? Just today, right? I mean, people, you know, people, what was the famous quote? Getting to people is easy, getting to play together is the hard part, right? Getting a person to do something is easy. Try and herd a group of kids to do something, right? You're a teacher. Oh my goodness, teachers. You know, I mean, I babysit my 3-year-old granddaughter and I'm literally exhausted. There's 5,000 things going on at one time. I'm exhausted, right? Trying to run and, you know, trying to manage your household. I hate dinners. We go to dinner a lot as a family because my 3 kids all have households here now. My 2 boys, by the way, bought houses with their wives right next door to each other, which is something you can't make happen. It just happens. You know, talk about serendipity, right? It just happens. But I hate going, where do you want to eat? I will send a note to so-and-so. This text, it's like 14 texts later, they're still trying to go, where do you want to eat? I hate trying to get people, getting them to work together is very hard. People are very difficult. You know, the first thing you have to do, I mean, two pieces of advice. One, you have to have a conversation and make sure they realize they're being difficult, right? Because not everybody does. You know, sometimes I'm being difficult and my daughter or my wife or one of my boys reminds me of it. You're being difficult, Dad, for no reason. Stop. The second thing is you have to try and work with them for some tools or to change the way they operate, you know, that they can be more successful. I had in business, one of my business partners now is the most anal human being I've ever met in my life, and I'm pretty anal. He headed up comp and benefits for me and Equifax. Moses will know what I'm talking about here. But he headed up compensation and benefits for Equifax, which is a big, giant, you know, regulation-intensive job, right? Then I hired him to go head up comp and benefits for our company, ChoicePoint. But I said, look, I don't want people to be career staff kind of people. I want you to go do this, but then I want to move you in operations. And he literally in that job, when I moved him into operations, he was our data czar. He was in charge of all the data we bought everywhere. And we spent $600 million a year buying data, you know, around the country from governments and all kinds of places. And he had 1,000 data contracts maybe to buy all that data. He wore everybody he dealt with out. He treated them like he was reading an insurance policy. You know, every single thing they sent him had to be redlined and looked at. And he just drove people nuts. And I loved it to death. And we literally sat down and had a bit of an intervention with him and said, you're driving us all crazy, man. You got to stop it. You know? And he fought us a little bit because we were sloppy and didn't realize all the things we were signing and all of the stuff we were doing wrong. But ultimately, he straightened out. I mean, I think that, you know, if we all realize we're flawed, so you got to deal with it openly, right? But it happens every day on every job site in America, right? I mean, I'm on job sites now where they change people's names during the day. Construction sites are really interesting places. But, you know, they'll have like names for you. If you're a screw up for the day, they'll give you a different name today because you're in the penalty box, you're being a pain in the butt to everybody, so you've got a different name. You know, and then tomorrow maybe you'll earn your name back. Stuff like that, right? Childish, but it works. Yes.
How long did you say you worked for Equifax?
How long? I worked for Equifax from, this is a good test here, from 1989 until 1997.
Well, I was probably one of the many employees you were talking about. That was my first job out of high school.
Oh, good. There you go. Did
I'm
we fit?
actually working on an Equifax implementation right now at my current job.
Okay, good for you.
Yeah.
It's a small world. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't fit in Equifax either. I'll tell you that. I was from a very freewheeling environment, and Equifax is a pretty buttoned-down company, right? I mean, it's a bit of a utility-like place, and it had been taken over by a bunch of IBM guys who were also pretty buttoned down. And I remember, I'll tell you one story. I had a guy that worked for me that for a long time, when I went into the insurance services division, I had this guy that ran training. I never saw him training anybody. He was always in his office. And so I watched this for a while, and then I kind of sideways went in and said, what's his schedule? Does he have any whatever? And, you know, it turned out he wasn't really doing a whole lot because we had cut the budget for training, so he was like sitting in his office just kind of doing stuff. And his bad fortune was I walked by his office a whole bunch, and it was like, who is this guy and what is he doing? So I finally went in, after I'd done all my investigation, I said, well, we don't need a trainer when we're not doing any training. So I went in to meet with him and to tell him I was going to let him go. And he said, yeah, I've been expecting that. You know, basically I want that to happen. So fine, that was easier than I thought. All right, the next day I'm going to work and he's teaching a training class down at the corporate training center. And wait a minute, I just fired that guy yesterday. How's he downstairs teaching a corporate training class? And the Equifax Inc. had hired him out of my division because I'd let him go. And so that's the kind of mentality that, you know, just like makes somebody like me lose my mind. It's like, how can you let this happen, you know? He was a good trainer, obviously, but it's like, what? Should we have done this differently, maybe? No one picked on Equifax. Love to they still get a retirement check from every month. Yes, sir.
Looking back as a child, is there any advice you would like to have had or were told of how to navigate through the rails of school?
I mean, as light as I described my interest in performance, you know, it was frustrating. My dealing with my parents was frustrating. You know, my dad was a first generation college grad, 13 brothers and sisters. You know, he you know, was definitely authority figure, you know, in the house. Mom worked part-time like everybody's mom worked part-time. Mine luckily worked at the doctor's office, so we got stitched up for free because I got stitched up a lot. Falling down. But I mean, you know, your father, the way your father hears about this was real. And I wish, I think my dad and I both wished all those moments hadn't happened. But I also wished that it didn't matter to him that much. I wished I'm saying that, I'm very inarticulate about that, but I wish we had synced up our expectations better. because I could have done better on some things if I wanted to, but I just didn't care. And he could have realized some things didn't matter all that much, but he was trying to prove a point. Back to my, be careful what you know, do you want to feel better? Do you want to get what you want? We had a lot of, do you want to feel better moments, you know, and I was a stubborn child. And back then you could, you know, whack your kids around pretty good if you wanted to. We're fine, okay? So, we're fine, peace. We're fine, but wow. Yeah, I wish that had been done differently. Yes, Angela.
So I have 3 children like you, and you know, every child is very different. My middle child is one that lives in the shadow of his sister, and he's sort of like you, not doing great in school, you know, got a
C
great...
students rule the world.
Yeah, you know, and we try to tell him that, but there's a self-confidence issue because the world today says you have to perform, you have to make grades, that kind of thing. Looking back on your experience with your dad, what advice would you give to parents today to help a child like you feel successful in a world that's just all about the grades and the numbers? And
You know, I had this with one of my kids. We had this with one of our kids too. All my kids are products of my family, make no mistake. Okay, all of us have. Michael will vibrate the whole table off when he's sitting at dinner. I mean, all of them are kind of bouncy flouncy all over the place. But my youngest really struggled feeling successful, partially in the shadow of the brother and sister, partially just because he learns different. You know, and we were able to, you know, move him to a private school. Not this one, I didn't know of this one at the time, but we moved him to a private school and helped him. You know, and again, it was all about, buddy, I just want you to feel successful. I don't really care what you accomplish. I mean, you know, truthfully, if I don't want to talk about Matt, but if Matt were here, he's not, he's got a beer event in another place in town here, but, you know, I would tell him that, you know, there were plenty of times, well, I thought high school was out of the question. You know, I certainly thought college was, you know, a stretch. He went to one college and had 3 majors and, you know, just kind of, again, didn't feel particularly successful, but it was a little bit of, you're fine, find something that fits, you know, go grow up, you know, they're learning other stuff besides just grades, right? But, you know, let's figure out how to find some traction on something. But we went through, you know, we went through the business of music, music theory, computer science, the business entertainment industry, and we ended up in like business management or something, and now he runs a brewery. I mean, that, you know, I mean, sometimes you just gotta, you know, run the miles up, right? I mean, I think social is a problem, right? I mean, I spent most of my life in consumer data, right? I'm on the boards of companies now that do profiles of people based on all their social data, the analytics data, the stuff that you put out there. It's hard to feel normal when there's a million points out there of everybody that has things that you don't have, and they are the way you're not, and they are better than you, or they are different than you, or whatever. You got to find we all got to find a way to make them fit in, right? I mean, I think you know, I'm a big fan of lower the pressure in general, right? I'm, you know, not an escalator. People will, you know, escalate up. I'm done, right? My wife says I'm a bathtub failure. Calm, ballistic, that's it. It's over. We're not, you know, I don't ramp up much, right? But I think kids can get amped up. I mean, you know, my kids, all of them, I mean, we have kids on, you know, various medications and other stuff as well. But, I mean, finding a way to take the pressure off, you know, look, it's okay. So you're good at some stuff. Let's talk about what you're really good at. You're not good at that. Guess what? I suck at fly fishing. I'm truly awful at it. But you got to find a, you know, again, to Steve's comment earlier, I think, everybody processes information differently, and everybody has different things that you know, ramp them up or, you know, make them feel successful. You just got to keep it whacking away until you can figure out how to get to that. right? And try and find an environment where they can feel successful, whatever it is. You know, I have a friend that has a child with a physical deformality that isn't immediately visible, but is apparent, you know, after a while. And the kid just can't function in normal schools. And because of that, not because the kid can't function, but because it can't get past this, you know, physical abnormality. And ultimately they found a place where, you know, that's normal, right? There's a million versions of normal, folks. You know, you're looking at them right in this room, right? There's a million different versions of normal. So that's my best advice. Also, it mostly turns out, you know. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me. I can't believe it.